of the moment that we're in 70 years on, because a part of me feels like those that were there, that participated in the process, were way ahead of their time. If they could, conceptualize this in 1955, and the best that we can offer up today is a critique of what they did, and not necessarily a continuation of how we're going to build on those struggles and build on where they need to be continuities, then really part of the failure rests partly on us as generations that have come after.
No, absolutely. But like I said, so part of the solution does rest with the current regime since the sellout at Codesa. But that just highlights once again that the demands of the Freedom Charter is not implemented and can be, and allows for this exploitation and oppression that we see today. The charter has to be amended or scrapped, I believe, because we see the hatred, the racial hatred, because it's entrenched in the Freedom Charter. There's no scientific basis for whatsoever for coloureds, Indians, and being different.
So Brian, were they not working with the best that they had during the time in which they existed?
Look, from a capitalist point of view, yes. But, socialism has been around for many centuries. The ideology and the teachings, and they could have drawn from that. And we see today that how the crisis of the country and the exploitation carries on and the looting carries on. There's it doesn't seem to abate.
Okay.
So, I mean, look, this looting is extremely serious. I mean, we find that gold mines have been looted. And like the Duma family, for example, we see one can go on, and nothing is done about it.
All right, Brian.
The Zondo Commission, he hasn't even mentioned.
Okay, Brian, we're going to leave it there with you out in Cape Town. Moeketsi, you're in Bloem. Good morning.
Thank you. Okay, how are you?
Good, Moeketsi, go for it.
Okay, according to my understanding, the president that is about to be married, I think the current president of Zambia is quite being cared about the issue, because the guy died in South Africa. Maybe he wanted to be buried in South Africa. We don't know, because we are not his family. So why can't the current president leave the guy to be buried in South Africa? Maybe that is what he wished. I don't see why he needs to make such a big deal about it. Like, seriously.
Yeah, it's created a whole spectacle of that process, which is quite a painful process, right? Especially for the people that have and feel the loss the most, which are his family, the people that loved him.
True. Because I really don't understand. The guy needs to rest in peace, because we know exactly that while the former president was still alive, they were in the rival. So now he wants to bury his family. Like, it doesn't make any understanding out of it. Like, really.
Okay. All right, Moeketsi. Let's leave it there. Thanks for that contribution. Shura, you're in Durban. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Cathy. Thanks for calling. I want to talk about the president's visit to the United States during the time of the refugees. Those refugees were crime refugees. The president kept saying there is a small percentage of black population in South Africa that doesn't want to reform, and nobody responded. Hello?
Yes, Shura, I'm listening to you.
Yes. Now, my thinking is this. I don't know if you watched the Oprah Winfrey show years ago, that the black population is divided. This upright section that's law-abiding citizens, and then it's a small percentage that sees white culture government as it's a culture that wants to humiliate them, wants to bring them down. They see it as oppression and humiliating. I want to say, especially humiliating and white supremacy, bullying. They don't understand that law and order is there as protection. And I think, hello?
Yes, Shura?
Yeah. And I think that percentage, I know South Africans, I know South African black people, if that percentage, you people do excellent work on this radio show. If we can find national dialogue and talk to them and bring out in the form of a teaching, they will change. They will understand. It's the only way we're going to go forward and tighten the laws and bring order.
So who must be called? Who needs to change, Shura?
That percentage needs to change. We're going to have to find a way to open their eyes that if the laws are tightening, bring law and order back into the country, that percentage is going to rise up. And you and I will wish we could rather bring this guy back. They will rise up and say, oh, no, we're back in apartheid now. And that's why the president, we have to understand the president's in a hell of a situation wherever he is. He doesn't know where to touch, what to do. I think this is my personal opinion.
So you don't support. So just to understand, Shura, so you don't support the idea of the minority that doesn't want to change, because part of how I understood it was to be in the context of why the South African economic landscape is the way that it is, and why the high inequality is the way that it is. So if people are refusing to change, you have the power to actually influence that, because you make the laws, you make the rules. So why has there been such little repercussions taken against those who don't want to change, who don't want to transform? So you are saying there shouldn't be a tightening of any advances or reformations towards transformation, as that might lead to the exit of that minority?
No, it's going to lead to the rising up of that minority. And we can help them and teach them that law and order is there for protection. It's not white culture government. It's not apartheid coming back. So that we can move forward. They don't understand. Let me tell you this. In America, they had the same problem. I didn't watch the Oprah Winfrey show when that Ku Klux Klan came onto the Oprah Winfrey show. Mexico had the same problem with the drug cartels to overthrow the government law and order that the Mexicans used to run to the United States, and Trump had to close the borders down. And that is not even anywhere near our situation is not anywhere near as bad as that. Our black people are not like that.
I see what you're saying, Shura. But has it not been 30-odd years of trying to explain, of trying to make people understand why there's a need for transformation in the first place?
They don't understand it. They look at it, okay, there's a white man on top again. They're going to oppress us if they come back into power. That's their fears. We have to come forward and address that percentage. You guys can do it. You guys are excellent on these radio stations, and open topics to lure these people and find national dialogue to talk to them and hear what they have to say about it.
Okay, all right, Shura, I hear you. It's an important point that you're making, but I think on some level we also have to acknowledge that it's not like there hasn't been opportunity for people to, number one, be educated, because if you're truly invested in the project of South Africa, then you also have to understand the context and the nuances of what being in this country means and of what being South African means. And sometimes one gets the feeling that people just don't want to change because they don't want anything to change. So it's not that they don't understand why the situation is problematic. It's that it's not in their interest to see it as problematic. Butana, you're in Rosebank. Good morning.
Good morning, my sister.
Yes, sir.
You know, one of the clauses of the Freedom Charter, the people shall govern. Yet crooks and thieves are running amok in all government departments.
The people, the crooks and thieves chosen by who, Butana?
Chosen, of course, by some people. Remember, 60% of South Africans said we don't want these people in government. 60% of us, we said we don't want these people. We know how they behave. We know how they destroyed our government. Yet there they are, by hook and crook. They're running government. Cathy, people are not drowning only in floods. People are drowning in poverty. People are drowning of unemployment. They went to overseas and spent about 300,000 one person. That these people shall govern. And they can't deal with crooks. Only now, our premier here has tried to sort out the lifestyle audit. But guess what? But Beta has died. Too little, too late. She's died. Guess what? They don't even want to implement the what is requested of please protect the whistleblowers. They ignore those things. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. It's so bedeviling.
Look, Butana, I can understand the frustration, right, around some of the issues that exist within our government. But I do think that the broader conversation for me is about how we as South Africans are participating in this democracy and the extent to which we actually see that participation as having an impact. Because what is convenient for the politicians and the political parties across the board is for us to play on the sidelines, for us to be perpetual victims of a system that is designed for us to participate, is designed for us to hold leaders accountable. And so we make it easy for the politicians when we sit back and we are not as involved and as engaged as we could be.
Well, I agree with you, but South Africans are gradually realizing that we can't go on this way. It is enough. It is really enough. And South Africans are participating. People are manipulating these things.
Butana, when you look at the number of South Africans that are actually voting, it's a fraction of the voting population.
Indeed, I agree
16 million of about 40 million people that are eligible to vote.
I agree with you. Probably it's because of their frustration. They see that this vote doesn't take me anywhere. This vote won't give me work. This vote is putting me more in poverty.
Yes, but doing nothing is equally unhelpful.
Indeed, I agree with you.
Okay.
But we are not going to stop talking about this thing, Cathy. We are not.
Okay.
Butana. We keep on raising these issues.
Yeah, look, I think we're at the point where we need to get beyond raising and lamenting, right? We need to ask, what is it that we, the people, then do? And part of it is just start with the low-hanging fruit. Get involved in your community. Get involved. Know what's happening. Hold the ward councillor accountable. Let's start it there. Charlie, you're in Koffiefontein. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy.
You sound so down today, Charlie. What's wrong?
No, I'm not down, man. It's just that a lot is on my mind, man. But otherwise, I want to raise this issue of Israel and Iran. Benjamin Netanyahu, in 1992, when he was still an MP, he told Israel's message that Iran is about 3 to 5 years away from acquiring a nuclear bomb. Then in 1995, again, when he wrote a book, Fighting Terrorism, he repeated the same thing 3 years later. If I'm not mistaken, in 2002, when he appeared before the U.S. Congressional Committee, he was the one advocating for invasion of Iraq and Iran. But then only that one of Iraq, the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq happened, which was said that there was no weapons of mass destruction which took place. Then in 2009 also, he also said again, Iran is about 1 or 2 years away from acquiring nuclear weapons. According to Bibi Netanyahu, Iran is always 2 years, 3 years away from acquiring nuclear weapons. Right now, Israel has killed over 200 Iranians. Some of whom are innocent people. There's nothing to do with this. And the worst part of all is that their big brother is the one who's supporting them with the bombs and whatnot. I don't see people getting an uproar regarding this. But if Iran retaliates, then people would lose their minds over Iran bombing Israel. But it's okay if Israel bombs Iran and kills civilians. So I want to know, Hornoman, why does the UN stand in the UN stand in such instances? Because Israel and the US and the like, they're allowed to have nuclear weapons, but Iran is not. They are the ones who dictate which country should have nuclear weapons, which country should not have. They are the ones who dictate in this country we want regime change, in this country we do not.
Yeah.
They've been saying since 1992 that Iran is 3 years away from having nuclear weapons. It's 30 years later now. 33 years later. Iran does not have. And even if Iran did have nuclear weapons, they never bombed any country. Do you see in what unfair world we are living in, Cathy?
Yeah.
Those with the money and with the power can dictate who can have what, and then they can bomb and kill people in that country, and then they can advocate for regime change. And there's nothing that people are going to do, because that is the West.
And think about how that situation is going to be influenced by now NATO going to get more contributions from its member countries, right?
I'm saying sometimes I don't want to blame North Korea with their nuclear weapons. They are known to have nuclear weapons, but Trump will not go in and bully those people, because they know one nuclear weapon can reach the west coast of USA. You see.
Okay, Charlie, in Koffiefontein, let's leave
Thank
it there.
You, Cathy.
Yeah, I think I saw a statement from the UN's Antonio Guterres that was expressed concern about the situation. But I guess the point here, Charlie, is that you want something stronger, perhaps something with greater clarity around just why what the U.S. has done is a violation of various international law protocols, and why it should be condemned in the harshest sense. I think China is the country that I've seen issue a really strong statement against part of what happened over the weekend. All right, let's take the latest 10 o'clock news update.
In our top stories, reflection on 70 years of the Freedom Charter and analysis on the dispute over former Zambian president's funeral. Good morning. As South Africa commemorates the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, academic Pitika Ntuli asserts that the majority of the Charter's promises have been abandoned. The ANC will hold a briefing at the Walter Sisulu Square as part of the commemoration of the Freedom Charter adopted in Kliptown, Gauteng 70 years ago. Professor Ntuli says the Charter has lost its value.
We came up with brilliant ideas. We had the RDP, reconstruction and development. What is it that we are reconstructing? What is it that we are developing? The agenda is just very clean and clear. Only needs ideology to implement it. Then we also came up with the Chapter 9 institutions, all of them that were geared to fulfill that kind of a charter. But then somewhere along the line, neo-coloniality, that template of oppression, took over the ruling class, that it became now more about my self-serving greed and corruption.
Human rights lawyer advocate Simba Chitando says the High Court in Pretoria is likely to rule in favour of Zambia's former president Edgar Lungu's family. This after the court granted an interdict halting the burial of Lungu yesterday. The Zambian government wants a state funeral in Zambia for Lungu, however his family has refused because of his political feud with the current Zambian president Hakainde Hichilema. Deputy Judge President Aubrey Lidwaba said parties had agreed after consultation that Lungu would not be buried until the case is heard on the 4th of August. Advocate Chitando says South African law favours the family.
The South African court is bound by South African law, and this is something that's probably very difficult for the Zambian government to hear, is that the South African law is on the side of the family. The family have got a right to bury their loved one in a country that they wish to bury their loved one. It would be a very different situation or circumstance if the South African government said that they do not want former President Lungu to be buried in South Africa. It would be a very different situation.
Johannesburg Executive Mayor Dada Morero maintains he always knew he will retain the mayoral chain despite a motion of no confidence against him. The DA tabled the motion arguing that Morero is failing in his duties, resulting in the city deteriorating. The opposition party also raised concerns with the establishment of the bomb squad, saying the mayor failed to consult council on the initiative. Morero admits there are service delivery challenges in the city. However, he believes the DA was playing politics when they filed the motion against him.
We were disappointed with the Democratic Alliance. I mean, the arguments that they presented in council on the motions were very weak, not convincing. And any resident or citizen listening to them will basically make a conclusion that it was just an electioneering, nothing to do with the state of Johannesburg, which in fact we have admitted that things are not well in Johannesburg. They require attention, and that's the attention we give into Johannesburg.
Police lead investigator Brigadier Bongani Gininda is expected back on the witness stand when the Senzumehiwa murder trial resumes at the High Court in Pretoria this morning. Yesterday, Gininda testified that video footage of Longwe Twala, a day after Senzumehiwa was murdered, did not show any signs he was injured by a bullet. And finally, Kenyan activist Marilise Bubwa says they will not relent fighting against the high cost of living in their country. Protesters took to the street yesterday to mark the one-year anniversary of anti-tax demonstrations in which at least 60 people were killed. More people have reportedly lost their lives and hundreds were injured during the protest yesterday. The Communications Authority of Kenya ordered all television and radio stations to stop any live coverage of the demonstrations. The move sparked outrage among journalists and activists who call it an attack on press freedom. Bubwa says they will continue the fight for better living.
There's so much force that is being used against peaceful protesters. There's so much that is being used to discourage women from participating from the protest because they're threatening to use gender-based violence as a tool. And we do have cases of people who have been raped and all that kind of stuff. We want a more affordable cost of living in Kenya, but also we no longer want Ruto in the office. He has looted all that he could potentially loot from the country, and Kenyans want their country back, and Kenyans are clear on that. We will keep fighting if it's the last thing we do for our country, Kenya.
Recapping the top story, as South Africa commemorates the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, academic Patika Ntuli asserts that the majority of the Charter's promises have been abandoned. The ANC will hold a briefing at the Walter Sisulu Square as part of the commemoration of the Freedom Charter adopted in Kliptown, Gauteng 70 years ago. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide, leading the conversation.
Welcome back to the sun-drenched shores of St. Marie, where the beaches are beautiful and the murders are mysterious. It's Death in Paradise Season 7. New cases, quirky suspects, and D.I. Jack Mooney, who's still figuring out the island and how to drink coconut water gracefully. Catch the show where paradise meets puzzling crime, because even in paradise, someone always has a secret. Death in Paradise Season 7, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on S3. Starts 28 May. S3, open up.
Winter in Nelson Mandela Bay is for getting out and not staying in. Get outdoors on a green flag hiking trail or go for a game drive at one of 15 private reserves right at our doorstep. Hit the beach or get on board with a whale watching cruise. Explore the historical heart of our city or come vibe with the locals on a township tour. There's so much to discover. Find Nelson Mandela Bay, South Africa on Facebook or visit nmbt.co.za. Nelson Mandela Bay, your winter and our summer destination.
This week on FC Meets, former Moroka Swallows and Baroka dribbling wizard Sipho Moeti, affectionately known as Gobe, shares his rise from being worshipped at festive games to his inevitable rise to the Betway Premiership. He shares his story of disappointment, triumph and controversy. FC Meets, football made for community by community. Richard game. Tune into SABC Sports on DTT Channel 4, the Saturday at 6 p.m. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana, weekdays 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 8 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of The Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be getting into Municipal Watch. And today, we're focusing on the Govan Mbeki municipality in Mpumalanga. So do stay tuned for that conversation. Before we get to it, lots of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line. We'll take a couple of them.
Good morning, Cathy. You're getting very excited when people are asking you, how are you? Please answer them, Cathy. Don't force them to go for it. Anonymous in Northern Cape.
Good day, SFM. I'd just like to comment on the Freedom Charter. There's two things that I think are significant about the Freedom Charter. The first one is the Freedom Charter is a socialist document, essentially. It is an outdated socialist document, meaning socialist thought hasn't developed since then. So it is outdated, but it needs to, the point being that we need to reclaim that as a socialist document so that we can develop new ideas. Secondly, it is a subversive document because it is the Freedom Charter was a multiracial, it transcended race. It subverted the idea of racial division in the country because it was written by whites, blacks, coloreds, and for everyone. So that's the power of socialism, and we need to return to that.
Morning, Cathy. This is the funniest conversation I've ever heard you having. You know, you and Cheryl are talking past each other. You think she's saying something and she's saying quite another. Let me clarify to you. Cheryl is saying black people, there is the ones that are the good guys, the clever blacks. And then there's this percentage that is asking for reforms and transformation. And she's saying that the ones that are asking for transformation need to be convinced, to be led by you guys, the SAFM, what you consider clever blacks, because apartheid is not coming back. It's just that it's law and order, and they see law and order as oppression and apartheid. That's what she was saying. So I hope that clarifies it for you, Shab. It's MJ from George.
My name is Lester Duma. If you can check here, the political head as the cabinet of the president, they are useless because they are just spending money from trips and from corruption. And then Ramaphosa is just a president to finish his term. And his second term, he make a DA as a security against vote of no confidence. He's doing nothing. So let's stand and do better for voting DA. Thank you.
Good morning, Oskethy. It's Feather Tracker here in Northern Cape, coming from KZN, heading to Western Cape. Oskethy, it's like a trend. You remember Joseph Kabila was not in good terms with the then current president of the DRC. You remember the former president of Botswana, Ian Khama, ran away from the then current president. And also our very own former president Jacob Zuma and the current president, they don't see eye to eye. And also the former president, the current president of Zimbabwe, was not seeing eye to eye with the then president Robert Mugabe.
This president of Zambia is honestly just a personification of evil. I mean, he persecuted Edgar Lungu in life, and now he's persecuting him again in death. Edgar Lungu said he mustn't go to his funeral. Now, he not only does he want to go to his funeral, he actually wants to bury him. I mean, seriously. Why can't he just let the man be buried and rest? End of story. Mtunzi.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
The National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
What about the many high-profile DA leaders that are not part of your party any longer? I'm looking at Musi Maimani, Pumzile van Dam, Lindiwe Mazibuko, Makashule Ghana, Herman Bashaba. For whatever reason, could be many of what we spoke about above before, but they're gone. What does that say about the DA's ability to hold on to these leaders that may well be the type of leaders that you would need to be able to govern the country?
Former black leaders have come to our party and grown up through the party than have ever left our party. So you're not mentioning Salim Malaxi, you're not mentioning Salim Simanga, you're not mentioning Sibiru Wahube, you're not mentioning any of those, because nobody knows the name of any black leader in the DA because they're considered to be sellout by the media, and they only become famous when they leave the DA.
Alan Ziller, chairperson of the DA's Federal Council.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM. This Youth Month, SAFM celebrates the spirit, power and potential of young South Africans. Join us as we dive into conversations that matter, from innovation to education and skills for the changing world. Empowering youth for meaningful economic participation. Because at SAFM, we're not just talking, we're leading the conversations that move us. Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Well, today we focus on the Govan Mbeki local municipality in Mpumalanga, and we look at the state of service delivery there. This is a municipality that has been going through very dire financial challenges, or is in a dire financial state, rather. The municipality has been facing Eskom debt worth billions of rand water debt, delays in creditor payments, and these continue to put a strain on the functioning of that municipality. There was a turnaround strategy, a financial recovery plan that had been put in place for the municipality 5 years ago. However, slow implementation of that particular recovery plan has led to some of the continued challenges in the municipality. So today we're going to be speaking to some of the role players there. Let me welcome firstly the executive mayor of the Govan Mbeki Municipality, Councillor Nhlakanipho Zuma. Good morning, Councillor Zuma. Thank you for your time this morning. Okay, it seems we've lost him on the line. We'll try and get him back up on a different one. Wilson Chauke is a resident of Marikana at the Mandela section in Mbalenhle. Wilson, good morning to you. All right. We seem to be having an issue with our lines there. We're going to have to take a break so that it gives us a chance to reconnect with everybody and get into this conversation.
Every person, no matter who you are, what music you're inclined to listen to, and what you do with your weekends. You need a weekend playlist. It's that musical mix of music that accompanies the lazy weekends, whether catching up with friends and family or just taking some time to reflect. Tune in to The Soundtrack of Your Life with me, Ernest Pillay, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 to 4 on SAFM.
Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
All right, we continue with the focus on the Govan Mbeki Municipality. Let's try and bring in our guests yet again. Councillor Nhlakanipho Zuma is the Executive Mayor at the Govan Mbeki Municipality. Councillor Zuma, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to the listeners, in particular the ones from Govan Mbeki.
Wonderful. Wilson Chauke, you're a resident of Marikana at the Mandela section in Mbalenhle. Good morning, Wilson. Hello, Wilson. All right.
Thank you very much for having me on the radio, and greetings to all the residents of Mpumalanga, Govan Mbeki local municipality, Mandela section, especially people of Marikana. Thank you.
Okay. And Terry Lee Kleinhans is a DA councillor in the municipality. Terry Lee, good morning to you.
Good morning, and welcome to everyone, and thank you to the listeners for having me.
Well, just recently, we had a statement, in fact, it was on Tuesday, from the Freedom Front Plus, who are unable to join this conversation, issuing a statement condemning how the Govan Mbeki municipality is being run. They say municipal workers instructed residents of Secunda and Bethel to purchase power cables before their electricity could be restored. Water is also one of the major challenges that residents are having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. This is while the municipality is marred by allegations of corruption. So let me start, Mr. Chauke, with you as somebody who represents residents, at least from a particular area of Govan Mbeki. What do you know about residents being told to help subsidize the delivery of services that the municipality charges for, gets paid for through revenue collection, and should be supplying anyway?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak about an issue which has been raised by a certain political party, possibly in affluent areas of Secunda, Trichard. Those are well-developed areas with a beautiful infrastructure, and I wish I could have been allowed to answer issues that pertain to the people of Mandela section, people of Marikana section, who do not have electricity every day. Yes, I will speak to the issue of infrastructure. It's the first time I'm hearing it. I sit in a portfolio committee of electrical, which means that is where we take and make the policies. I should be able to tell you categorically, without any ambiguity, that it is not true that the electrical department will ask individuals to buy their own equipment to be augmented to the network of the local municipality of Gadzenbeki. However, we will speak again to the issue of the electrical disruption in Mandela section, where we go for on end 12 hours without electricity, sometimes 24 hours. There are certain areas where residents even go in as far as 7 days without electricity. That is something that I'm ready to talk about. But in terms of people being asked to buy their own bundles of electrical cables as well as transformers, I think I would not really want to drag myself into that because there might not be truth in that. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Chauke, at least in as far as it relates to the area where you are from, you have not experienced such requests.
Correct.
Okay. Tell us then about some of the challenges specifically that you want to raise in this conversation.
The challenges that I would love to categorically raise in this conversation about electrical supply is the fact that Mandela section, which is Ward 20 in Gadzenbeki, has been neglected for too long. It is a specimen and the epitome of service delivery collapse when it comes to electrical installation as well as the provision of electricity to the people of Mandela section. Like I'm saying, the electrical department is trying. They were here just a couple of days back to try and engage communities on what should be done to improve the electrical infrastructure, as we shall hear them say when they start defending themselves. But I still believe that enough has not been done to shield the residents, especially those of Mandela section, MIE and Extension 26, which has improved recently, to shield them from the brand of intermittent electrical connection. Like I said to you, 24 hours on end, 7 days, 14 days to some other residents without electricity. That is not acceptable. It is a violation of their human rights to have that basic commodity in their homes. The people of Marikana also, they are staying in an area which we believe should be proclaimed, should be made official so that electricity infrastructure can actually be rolled in and make the life of residents easier. But that has not been done either. Thank you.
So Mr. Chauke, if you can then just explain for us the area that you are in. Is it a township? Is it an informal settlement? Do you have bulk infrastructure supply there?
It is an area that is divided into two, with the one section which is Extension 10 and Extension 16 being an area that is fully serviced with the bulk infrastructure. It has got transformers, it has got the bulk bundles, it has got the infrastructure, proper infrastructure. But that infrastructure, whenever it collapses due to some challenges that are normally expected to happen during a winter season like this, the turnaround time of responding to residents is very bad. And much more importantly, something that I would like to condemn is that residents, they are being told of a plethora of problems like people are bridging, people are hotspotting connections to other people who are not on the network. They are being told that these are the issues that are not allowing them to get the proper electricity. But it is not their duty to make sure that the infrastructure is protected. The municipality's duty with its security department to make sure that that thing is done. But us as residents, what we expect, we only expect nothing but proper electrical connection 24 hours a day in Mandela section. And then there is a second section, Wilson, which is Marikana now. Yeah? It's an informal settlement, but it is an informal settlement with all the bulk lines of sewer as well as water already connected in the area, and there are stains on that map. Although the people came here in 2014, which means it has been 11 years now, we really would have expected the municipality to come in very quickly and formalize, because there is also the issue of revenue collection, which cannot be enhanced as long as these people accept that they access that water for free, they access that sewer line for free and everything. So why does the municipality not just formalize Marikana section? Because there are stains there that has been earmarked and everything is on the map. Why don't they just formalize them so that they can roll in infrastructure of electrical cables and allow them to have a life similar to the rest of residents of Gadzenbeki?
So given how the area is broken up, at least in the way that you've described, is one of the reasons why there would be an overburdening of the electrical system? As you know, it sounds like that's part of the reason that has been given to you as residents. Could that be as a result of what is happening also in the informal settlement. That many
No,
people
the informal
who are
settlement
connecting,
is
yeah.
the informal settlement is completely separate from Extension 10 and Extension 16. So
Okay.
the informal settlement is not taking any electricity from Extension 10 and Extension 16. Those are two areas completely separated from each other. So now, let's stick to Extension 16 and Extension 10. Extension 10 and Extension 16, they are definitely overburdened. Why are they overburdened? Because a single residential stand which was designed to have one RDP with maybe a family of 5 individuals has since built about 10 rooms behind the RDP, not because it is their choice. Let me tell you, the last time that these people were given residential stands was in 2005, and that was, 20 years ago. The child that I gave birth to in that time is now turning 20 years, has got a wife and a child. They want somewhere to stay. I'm not talking about all the other generations in the middle. That also requires a place to stay, and they've gone on to build behind the main RDP house. It is not a choice. It is the fact that reflects clearly that black people do not have land in their own country, and it's a mess. We all have to be scrambling in one place like sardines in a tin of fish. So this thing requires the municipality now to realize that the transformer that they put in one street can no longer be enough, because now we have got 4 families staying in a unit which was initially designed to contain only one family. Therefore, we now have 4 plate stoves, we have 4 heaters, we now have 4 geysers, if anyone has got that luxury of having a geyser. So the municipality was supposed to grow with the time and understand the need to expand these transformers to continue to accommodate our people on this socialist agenda that they preach every day.
Okay, let me bring in Terry Lee Kleinhans, who is a DA councillor in that municipality. Terry Lee, your particular issues that you want to raise today. All right, it looks like we've lost that connection to Terry Lee, but in the meantime, let me bring in the mayor of the municipality, Nhlakanipo Zuma. So, Councillor Nhlakanipo, you heard the complaint that was raised by Mr. Chauke, a resident of Marikana, who says that the municipality has been unable to keep up with the development of its infrastructure to meet the growing population of the area.
Thank you very much. And let me acknowledge the questions and appreciate as they are being raised. Maybe before engaging with what Mr. Wilson Chauke has raised, there are questions that you spoke to as you started the engagement.
Yes, and I'll give you an opportunity to reflect on those. This is after I've also allowed Terry Lee Kleinhans to have her say when it comes to those concerns raised by Freedom Front Plus. So if you can, please just respond to the issues Mr. Chauke has raised. We'll deal with those on the other side of the headlines.
No, thank you very much. Firstly, let me say that I'm in agreement with the closing statement that says the municipality carries the responsibility to ensure that there is sufficient infrastructure to take care of the needs of the people in its vicinity. But we have to acknowledge, as you said in the beginning, as you were opening, that Govenembeki municipality has been one of those municipalities that have been facing financial constraints. The cause that has led to the challenges that we have, first and foremost, is the limitation of access by majority of the people within the municipality that was led to by the spatial development of the region. Most of the Africans or natives didn't have access to electricity, didn't have access to sewer, water, sanitation infrastructure, which led to the then administration that came in we're on the sixth one now. All of those administrations had to follow events in terms of ensuring that everybody has access.
Okay, Mr. Zuma, I'm going to ask you to pause it there. It's time for us to take the latest news headlines. We'll continue on the other side of this.
Thank you, Cathy. On the news headlines on SAFM, I am Ondalambana, and a very good morning. Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says global war creates significant hardships. Lamola addressed the third G20 Sherpas meeting underway in the Sun City Resort in Northwest. As South Africa commemorates the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, academic Bitika Nduli asserts that the majority of the Charter's promises have been abandoned, and Iran state media say the government has begun reopening airports in the east as life slowly returns to normal. The official number of deaths from the Israeli attacks has risen to above 600. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 17 rand 63 to the dollar, 24 rand 719 to the pound, and 20 rand 64 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mixed at the closing bell. The JC has extended gains in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are slightly higher. Gold is trading at $3,345. Platinum, $1,383 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $67.80 a barrel.
Are you looking for the best savings on spectacles? At Specsavers, enjoy 1,500 Rand off when you get tested at South Africa's trusted and most established optical group. Get 1,500 Rand off all frames in store, or use your 1,500 Rand off on our leading lens enhancements, such as drive light lenses that reduce artificial glare whilst driving. Book online or call your nearest store today. Affordable eye care, Specsavers. T's and C's apply.
What if you open your night to culture? Try new things and make space for new voices, new stories, and new perspectives. Open up your Saturday night with world-class entertainment, reality TV, and drama from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. only on S3. Open up.
If you think you cannot afford a lawyer, think again. Clientele Legal has made professional legal services affordable for you. Whether it's a civil, criminal, or labor-related matter, we have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS SAFM to 32195. That's SAFM to 32195 and we'll call you back. Clientele General is a licensed non-life insurer and an authorized FSP. Standard rates and terms and conditions apply.
It's a tough day for Mark. Tight deadlines and challenges everywhere. But Mark can rest easy, because when he bought his Hino 700 2845 truck tractor, he received a complimentary service plan covering up to 210,000 kilometers for short haul and up to 280,000 kilometers for long haul. Nice one, Mark. Visit your dealer today to find out more about this limited time offer. Hino, all the way. T's and C's apply.
Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at the Govan Mbeki municipality. This is for Municipal Watch this hour. On the line, Councillor Nhlakanipo Zuma is the mayor, Mr. Wilson Chauke, one of the residents of Marikana, and Terry Lee Kleinhans, a DA councillor within that municipality. So, Councillor Nhlakanipo, you were telling us about the challenges in investing in infrastructure and why there have been delays.
Yes. So when we prioritized the issue of access, Mandela section was one of those areas that didn't have any form of service pre-1994. Now, with the introduction of services, unfortunately, the culture of payment was not prioritized by those administrations, because this is the type of services that people were not familiar to and didn't understand that for them to get qualitative standards of services that they are supposed to get, they should be able to pay for them. Now, the general assumption that there is money that will come from national departments, provincial departments to put all the infrastructure in, pay for ESCOM, pay for rent water as they supply us with water, was what contained the community. Unfortunately, that is exactly that has led to the collapse of the municipality in terms of their financial stability. And that is why you now have a huge backlog in terms of development of new township establishments, while there is a massive growth of population that is faced by the governing municipality on that basis.
Yeah, Mayor, I don't understand. Are you saying that the investment in development is what has created the financial challenges for this municipality?
Inclusive, yes.
But development takes place at a level and scale which is determined by the municipality. It's not something that is imposed on you. It is something that you decide how you want to implement.
Yes. That is why I said to you earlier, a vast majority of our communities didn't have access at all. As we bring in the infrastructure for their servicing, we ended up with a burden that they unfortunately do not have capacity, some of them, to pay them for the infrastructure that they have been given. Others, they do have that capacity, but they are not familiar to them paying for such. So it has been a daunting task teaching our residents that they must understand that a municipality is a component of three elements, if I can put so. It is the council, it is the administration that is employed, and the community. Therefore, in the absence of one leg pulling towards the same direction, it causes the challenges that we are speaking about today. So the more you introduce the infrastructure, the more burden you get if the people do not pay for those services. So the sustainability of the municipality is dependent on the very same community that is being provided with the services.
So basically, the reason why you are having an issue with revenue collection is because people simply don't want to pay for those services.
In the main, yes.
And how are you dealing with that?
We are hosting various campaigns that seeks to bring awareness, that seeks to bring encouragement to the very same community and a detailed understanding so that they are able to be conscious that they must be able to service their accounts of the municipality. One of those campaigns is in a form of public participation where all ward councillors are expected every quarter to hold community meetings, speak about the service delivery issues, including the issue of payment. Secondly, it's for those that are unable to service their account to come forward and say, we are unable to service our account. Here is evidence that we cannot afford, so that they can be introduced into the indigent register so that government can be able to subsidize them. Then we can be able to sustain as the municipality, because if they are registered on the indigent register, then we will be able to get some form of allocation from national government to subsidize that particular account.
Terry Lee, let me bring you in here. You've heard what the mayor is saying. Is that a fair depiction of why it is that the municipality has so much debt, has been unable to keep up with it?
Cathy, thank you so much. Let me firstly start off by saying, I share the sentiment of Mr. Chauke as you were speaking, and I'm sure that once you speak to residents across all 32 wards, you will find the same sentiment regarding the service delivery as the entirety. And I just want to, on your original question, before I do answer the question you just asked, state that it is a concern across the board with electricity. And yes, maybe I'm not aware of the cable that was requested from the residents, but from our side, we are sourcing back actors to ensure that the excavations can take place. I know FAMSA and Christopher Ryan was 2 weeks without electricity, because the cherry picker driver was suspended, and it's literally a switch that had to be put on. We had businesses in Trichard for 3.5 weeks without electricity, and we still had to arrange trucks, etc., from our side through the public in order for it to take place. So I can understand the sentiment where it's coming from, that residents is actually coming to the party for the municipality as such regarding the service delivery, especially when it comes to electricity and water leaks. And you'll see that we also have substantially high losses within the municipality when it comes to water and when it comes to electricity. Even though our electricity has come down to, I think, the last month of 38%, we have still not seen an increase in our revenue paying towards our Eskom debt at the end of the day. I think it's a bit of a cheap shot from the mayor to state that for the past 31 years there hasn't been a solution. But what he's actually indirectly stating is that the financial recovery plans that have been put in place has not functioned. And that was exactly our concern when it came to the budget that was tabled for this coming financial year at the end of the day, because it was an unfunded budget with a recovery plan in place. But if he said that he's had the struggles for 31 years, he's actually also stating in the same sense that at the end of the day, our financial recovery plan is not assisting the residents. It is not working for the community, and it's not making the impact that it should, or else our revenue collection would have been at par, and we would have been able to maintain and to put new infrastructure in at these specific areas.
In fact, Councillor Nhlakanipo, the issue of the financial recovery plan is one that even the MEC has been taking up with you, the MEC of Finance in that province, who's described the municipality as being slow in implementing the financial recovery plan.
Yes, I agree. That's the first thing that, look, we are seated with a debt from Eskom, which is sitting over 5 billion rand. We are seated with a debt from Rainwater, which is seated just above 800 million. With both debts accumulating interest into millions. And firstly, one must indicate that as we continue to service these accounts, which were not being serviced before, we unfortunately have to tap into money that we are supposed to utilize for the advancement or the implementation of infrastructure. Secondly, as we service those particular accounts, we have to compromise on certain services and put a limitation, because if we don't do that, it means that we will continue to escalate the debt at a very rapid pace.
So which services are you putting a cap on?
Literally all of them. Literally all of them, on the basis that, for example, Mr. Wilson spoke about formalization of Marikana. Formalization is a process that requires investment, it requires land, it requires the infrastructure that we have just spoken about. Now, for that to happen, we will require quite a lot of money. Therefore, the problem will then be, if you prioritize that, it means that you must compromise what you already have, which has been the mistake that was created before, where prioritization to access was given and prioritization to maintenance was therefore not put in place. It was therefore compromised.
Yeah, but I don't understand what you mean when you say that you now have to put a cap on services. Already as it is, you have residents that are complaining about erratic power supply, and you, of course, are dealing with this 5 billion rand headache when it comes to your electricity debt. But how is the solution to provide less services when you can only and should only be charging for the services that you have provided? Because providing less services means less revenue for the municipality. So how does it get you out of the hole that you are in?
Maybe let me start here in saying that when we started with the FRP, which is the Financial Recovery Plan, we had losses of 72% of electricity, which is what led to the accumulating debt by Eskom. Now, we had to put an initiative that will seek to limit the losses so that it improves the revenue. Now, in so doing, it meant that we must procure a lot of meters, which do not come very cheap, ensure that we have sufficient human resource to ensure installation of those meters. It has been confirmed by Councillor Klein Hans that it has managed to reduce those losses from 72% to 38% as we speak. That is a positive that seeks to solve the problem that we have and improve in terms of the revenue. But the fact that has been raised by Councillor Klein Hans that we are a municipality that is operating on an unfunded budget, it means that literally there is no money to deliver the services. Therefore, you must be able to rob Peter to pay Paul so that you are able to
why is council passing unfunded budgets?
Because we must provide services at the end of the day.
No, that is not a reasonable enough excuse. And the reality is that municipalities across the country have been doing this, which only exacerbates the financial positions that you find yourself in. Because council, for whatever reason, have, and it's not just a Govan Mbeki municipality problem, it's a problem that we see across various municipalities. Because already that means that at the beginning of a financial year, you are planning to spend more than you have. So you are planning to worsen your debt problems.
I think that is why the minister and also SALGA have started a debate on the same matter and also released a white paper funding model of municipalities. Therefore, it cannot be reduced, as you have spoken about it, that you have a problem across municipalities. I cannot then say today, because we are having a problem of people that are unable to pay because they are unemployed, they are underemployed, therefore they must not get water. They must get water, and unfortunately, by them getting water, it means that it exacerbates the debt that we are having with red water. And that, unfortunately, is what causes the unfundedness.
So basically, you're saying that you're caught in this perpetual cycle and there's very little you can do to get yourselves out of it.
We are caught. There are initiatives that we are able to put forward which seeks to improve our revenue. I can indicate to you our revenue generation in 2021, when one came into administration, was seated at about 2.1 billion. Today we are seated at about 3.5 billion rand. So it means that there is means that have been able to yield results, but at the end of the day, we are owing 6-point-something billion debt. So if you look at 3.3 billion, it automatically tells you that you are literally insolvent. But
Mayor, the problem that you are now confronted with is that even with the review of your financial recovery plan, it was quite clear that you had not been implementing what had been put forward 5 years ago in the first place, which is why some of these problems continue to escalate. At some point, the interventions are there to try and slow down the impact of the problem, which is the debt here, or even to stop it where possible. But if you're not implementing your own recovery plans, you're never going to get there.
Look, we are implementing the plan, but the plan needs money for itself to sustain. As I've indicated to you now, that, for example, we had to put smart meters in order for people to start paying for their electricity. The cost for that has costed us over 1 billion rand, which that money should have been money utilized to pay ESCOM, but we now have to divert it to infrastructure so that we fix what is wrong with the system so that the system can be able to self-sustain.
Part of what has been happening is that there have been various allegations of corruption that have been leveled against officials in the municipality. You yourself have had to face a vote of no confidence in terms of how things in your municipality are being run.
Yes. Look, the term corruption is a universal term for a means that seeks to rob a particular public fund, if I can put it that way. I cannot denounce the fact that there has been corruption in the institution. That is why you will speak of suspension, you will speak of expulsions and the consequence management that we have done. Therefore, there is a lot that is being done to stabilize the system. So we are convinced that everything will be to normal once we are able to cap each and everything.
I don't understand what you've just said, Mayor. I was talking to you about the allegations of corruption. Just in the last month, the municipality has had to investigate a 20 million rand security contract that was riddled with irregularities. A report last year also found that you've been overpaying some of your senior managers. And all of these things are things that ultimately contribute to the financial position that the municipality finds itself in.
Maybe let me put facts on to those two. Firstly, there is no corruption with regards to the security contract on the basis that currently, as we speak, we do not have a contract that is for the period of 36 months, which is what the norm, on the basis that we have not been able to receive suitably qualified companies that are going to occupy the contract. There is no investigation that we are currently doing. Only what happened is that the municipal manager brought a report to council to inform council that he cannot appoint on the basis that he has not been able to find a suitably qualified company in line with the legislation and regulations that are given to him. Secondly, with regards to the issue of overpayments, it's not true per se. The legislation itself says for a particular grade of a municipality, you are allowed to make a motivation to the minister to say, on the basis of this particular skill, this is what we are requesting to pay this particular individual. If the minister gives a concurrence to such, it means that you have managed to qualify the reasoning why you are paying a particular manager at a particular grade. That is why, as we speak, we do have that particular concurrence from the minister. Therefore, there is no corruption on that note.
Let me bring in Mike from Middelburg. Good morning, Mike.
Thank you so much for taking my call. Yeah, you know, Cathy, by and large, in our province, Mpumalanga, you know, the challenges that we are faced with across municipalities didn't come abruptly. It was not just a boom, you know, kind of a situation, but it is a culmination of what I have stated over and over, and that is institutionalized micromanagement. And by micromanagement, among others, these directives and instructions, you know, imposed on the employees of the municipality by RECs and PECs, and more often than not, these directives and instructions are unlawful. You know, you remember, Cathy, when Honorable Premier was inaugurated, I raised the point in this very platform that if he can embark on a deinstitutionalization of administration, micromanagement, he shall have won half a battle, you know, in terms of the challenges that municipalities are faced with. As we speak now, Cathy, Nkomazi municipality has got a problem. There's a possibility that it might not pay full salaries to its employees as a result of mismanagement, you know, of funds and all the shenanigans in the administration. And it is all attributed to micromanagement until they face the elephant in the room. And by elephant in the room, I am referring to the PEC as well as the RECs, because that is where unlawful instructions and directives are coming from.
Thanks for that contribution, Mike, and I think very important matters that you've raised there. Terry Lee, what is the way out for the municipality in as far as you and your party are concerned?
Cathy, I think, we are so problem-driven in the municipality. When the budget came up, the question in council was raised to me when I stood up and said, where must we cut? Where must we cut? But it is, a mind shift that needs to also take place from the municipal side to say that where must we actually enhance and where must we actually get our revenue? And we need to do this by getting investors involved. And unfortunately, investors don't want to involve themselves in a failing structure. And that is currently where we find ourselves. We need to start venturing into getting independent powers, suppliers, getting them involved, giving back to the community if they, for instance, put in solar systems where they can actually stabilize the system, because every single time after an outage or when load shedding is implemented, we see the infrastructure go down, we see a surge running through the systems, and we have multiple trips, specifically in Secunda area, where we then have hours on end without electricity. So we need to start involving the investors in the area. We need to focus on an economical development structure and plan. There was one table 3 years or 4 years ago, but ever since that tabling to council, it was sent back and it has never come back to the council sitting as such. So we need to start focusing on these things. There is a way out. We cannot continuously be problem-driven and not solution-driven from our side. And we need to implement and enforce these things. We need to change the culture for payments that needs to take place. We need to cut people's electricities. We need to ensure that we take away the illegal connections that is taking place in the areas. We need to be productive in our sense moving forward.
Wilson, as residents, hearing what the mayor has said and the fact that the bulk of the problem, at least in as far as he's concerned, is that you as residents are simply not paying, what role do you think you can play to advance the objectives of the municipality and to help in stabilizing its finances?
Thank you very much. I think I will start by agreeing completely with the previous contributor, Mark, who said that our biggest problems in the municipalities is micromanagement, it's hotspotting, it's illegal hotspotting by the structures of the ruling parties that are in charge of the municipalities. I have said that if there was a model that will be able to be implemented in municipalities that is not influenced by corrupt political parties such as the ANC, half our problems will be solved today. But going forward, I really believe that these instructions, for example, you can hear that the mayor is about to be a vote of no confidence impeached. All that comes out of these internal agendas of those political parties, and it has got nothing to do with residents. But going forward, I remember one of the late former ministers, Pravin Gordhan, he used to announce billions and billions in subsidies to South African Airways, to Eskom, to all these state entities. I could just imagine what that can do if those subsidies were not given directly to Eskom, because the biggest burden on municipalities is these dates, because when we go to pay for the current account, we are not even touching the bill of that particular month. We are not even touching the current account. We are actually settling half of the interest that has been charged, and that thing is not getting us anywhere. We believe that if the state has got to subsidize big state-owned enterprises such as Eskom, Denel, your Transnet, and all these other, they should not do it at the source. Let them come down and do it at the municipality level and make sure that they sweep off the dates, allowing the municipality to focus on the current account.
All right, Wilson, thank you for that contribution. That's where we leave it with the Municipal Watch for today.
Keeping your family healthy this winter can feel like a daunting task. Try the Lung Shield range. It includes capsules to support healthy lungs and immunity, a syrup for kids that supports the immune system and promotes lung health, and an effervescent with 13 essential ingredients to optimize immune function. Put your family's health first this winter with the Lung Shield range. Available without a prescription at leading pharmacies. Lung Shield, prescribed by doctors, recommended by pharmacists.
Are you ready to save even more on brands you love at Dis-Chem? The more you buy, the more you save when you stock up on selected Unilever personal care brands such as Vaseline, Dove, Lux, Pond's, Radox and more. Get 15% off when you buy one product, 20% off when you buy two, and a massive 25% off when you buy three. T's and C's apply. Hurry, Unilever deals end 13 July, only at Dis-Chem. Better health starts here.
On the top stories, Lamula addresses the third G20 Sherpas meeting and life slowly returns to normal in Iran. For SAFM News, I am Ondilambana and a very good morning. Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamula, says global war creates significant hardships. Lamula addressed the third G20 Sherpas meeting underway in the Sun City Resort in Northwest. This as global intergovernmental organization United Nations is marking 80 years of existence. Lamula says there are no victories in war, but rather more victims.
Following last week's U.S. military strikes in the Iran, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, and I quote, "At this perilous hour, it is critical to avoid a spiral of chaos. We understood the United Nations promise 8 years ago, collective security over cohesion, the extinguishing of the law of the jungle. Alas, we find ourselves in an evolving global disorder that brings with it many perils for the weak and for the vulnerable."
The National Assembly will in the afternoon consider the report of the Standing Committee on Appropriations on the Division of Revenue Bill. The bill outlines how government revenue is divided between national, provincial and local spheres of government. The sitting will be at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Early this month, the fiscal framework and revenue proposals was passed by 268 votes against 88, while 2 MPs abstained. The fiscal framework allowed for the implementation of general fuel levy increase. As South Africa commemorates the 70th anniversary of the Freedom Charter, academic Pitika Nduli asserts that the majority of the Charter's promises have been abandoned. The ANC will hold a briefing at the Walter Sisulu Square as part of the commemoration of Freedom Charter, which was adopted in Kliptown, Gauteng 70 years ago. Professor Nduli says the Charter has lost its value.
We came up with brilliant ideas. We had the RDP, reconstruction and development. What is it that we are reconstructing? What is it that we are developing? The agenda is just very clean and clear. Only needs ideology to implement it. Then we also came up with the Chapter 9 institutions, all of them that were geared to fulfill that kind of a charter. But then somewhere along the line, neo-coloniality, that template of oppression, took over the ruling class, that it became now more about money, self-serving greed and corruption.
A Northern Cape man has been sentenced to 30 years in prison for raping his 11-year-old relative in 2016. The minor was raped by Musamunutsile Sihulela when she accompanied him to his house at Hertog outside Kuruman to fetch sugar. The Motibistad Regional Court in Kuruman found the 58-year-old guilty on 2 counts of rape. NPA provincial spokesperson Mujalifa Senukutswane says the court ordered that the accused name be entered into the National Register for Sex Offenders.
This sentence sends a clear and uncompromised message that the justice system will not tolerate the rape and violation of children. As the National Prosecuting Authority, we remain committed to holding perpetrators accountable and protecting our most vulnerable members of our communities.
Iran state media say the government has begun reopening airports in the east as life slowly returns to normal. The official number of deaths from the Israeli attacks has risen to above 600. The BBC's Lee Stusset, who's in the Iranian capital, Tehran, is being allowed to report in Iran on condition that none of her reports are used on the BBC's Persian service. This law from Iranian authorities applies to all international media agencies operating in that country.
Traffic is
is starting to return. The first international flights will happen today. You can see on the streets of Tehran there are still cafes and shops and government offices which are still shut. So many people left this city when Israel started attacking, and some of them haven't come back yet. They want to be sure that this ceasefire is going to hold.
Recapping the top story, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says a global war creates significant hardships. Lamola addressed the third G20 Sherpas meeting underway in the Sun City Resort Northwest. I'm Ondelambana for SAFM News Headlines at 11:30.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide. Leading the conversation.
This week on Off-Pitch Goals, having been a defensive rock for the Pefeni Glamour Boys, Kaizer Chiefs, Jomo Cosmos and Supersport United, Morgan Gould goes from threading passes to selling the most stylish threads in urban streetwear. He takes us through the rigors of the fashion industry, tackling design, manufacturing and retail. Streaming on SABC Plus and SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 on Saturday, 28 June at 8:30 p.m. Off-Pitch Goals, where we showcase how the stars score in business. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
Hi, I'm Khomotso KG Mweketi, and I believe in music's ability to connect, to heal, to remind, and to bring joy. And each week on my Saturday and Sunday show Seasons right here on SAFM, I endeavor to do just that. So join the movement of Seasons every Saturday and Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's addictive. You might invite a friend. Seasons, only on SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide with me, KG Mweketi. Because where words fail, music speaks.
This Youth Month, SAFM celebrates the spirit, power and potential of young South Africans. Join us as we dive into conversations that matter, from innovation to education and skills for the changing world, empowering youth for meaningful economic participation. Because at SAFM, we're not just talking, we're leading the conversations that move us. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Good morning, says Katie. This is Norman. That person is talking lies because it's true that thing called Azapo. There's a new section where people need electricity. They tell them to buy a cable so that they can connect for them.
Good morning, Sis Kathy and SAFM listeners. Mr. Chauga is spot on. The municipality is supposed to be catering for upgrades in every unit. Where there's a new settlement, if the power upgrade need to be done, because you can't. If the power was supposed to be accommodating 10 people and then there's 100 people, how are they gonna keep up? So that the box is gonna keep on tripping. The municipality needs to improve with time.
Hi, morning, Kathy. One thing I can say about the Kavanbeki municipality, I used to stay there. Nepotism, corruption, and tribalism in that area, that is the one that is causing the municipality to find itself in the situation that it is right now. You go to the section called Welamlambo. There was sewage spillage into the Welamlambo stream next to Sasol Club. The extension 17th and 14th, the sewage spillage in the streets. I don't even want to mention the potholes. If you have a big company like Sasol, you have the mines surrounding you, the resorts surrounding you. Why is it so difficult for them to do a proper, efficient the rates collection? If they're saying they are in this situation because they are failing to collect, it means that they do not have competent people there. They do not have competent people there. They must stop all this tribalism, corruption, and nepotism and hire people with competency there. Thank you.
This guy's a comedian, man.
Hey, he's doing a dance up and down, tiptoeing, tap dance. He spent like 2 minutes giving his story of how he must, what he must answer and what he mustn't answer.
Good morning, Cathy. The mayor, our municipal officials, Cathy, they were deployed to be in the municipality. You can hear them when they answer the questions. I mean, they can't explain to the public. They can't explain to the public with their finances. I mean, the mayor is not answering either any of the questions that you have asked, Cathy. There is a speaker in the municipality, in Elias Motswaledi municipality. We have just recently found out that the speaker does not have a matric certificate. But then we expect these officials, Kisi, to come and explain to the public about their finances. The mayor cannot answer your questions. And it's all in all these municipalities. Okay, please, get it to shame. South Africa, please wake up. Otherwise, we are going to have a problem.
Good SAFM. I think Eskom and these municipalities who are on Eskom or all the municipalities, these guys, they should just come with a new way. But I think the simple thing is to decrease electricity so that everyone can afford electricity and give everyone the new meters. Because now, this thing of increasing electricity is only straining the people who are able to pay this electricity, and they will end up not paying electricity also, because it's too much. It's too much. But now, if you imagine now, if you've got 10 people, and out of 10 of those people, only 3 people are paying electricity, and you increase electricity for those people, then it's going to strain those people. But if you give all those 10 people electricity, low price electricity, everyone can buy, and then they can recover that money that they have lost. Thank you.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
The citizens and the believers are in a high-level clash of emotions. Drama meets tension. The fight for 3 points is real. This is the PSL Promotional Playoffs. Catch the thrilling encounter between Cape Town City and Cashrick Stars this Monday, 30 June at 2:30 p.m. Streaming live on SABC Plus and SABC2. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
This week on FC Meets, former Moroka Swallows and Baroka dribbling wizard Sipho Moeti, affectionately known as Gobe, shares his rise from being worshipped at festive games to his inevitable rise to the Betway Premiership. He shares his story of disappointment, triumph and controversy. FC Meets, football made for community by community. Richencha game! Tune into SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, the Saturday at 6 p.m. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
I'm Michelle Constant. Join the JSB crew and I every Saturday and Sunday morning between 7 and 10 a.m. We promise to keep you informed and entertained with innovation, culture, cars, travel, life learnings, environment, and of course, your big fat juicy. Small stories, big ideas, massive inspiration. The Jet Set Breakfast on SAFM.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, we turn our attention this hour to the global debt crisis and just how it's choking development across the global south. As public debt soars, more than 50 developing countries now spend over 10% of their tax revenue just servicing interest, leaving little room for investment in basic services, including healthcare, education, transport, etc. A new landmark report, the Jubilee Report, a blueprint for tackling the debt and development crises, offers a bold plan to fix this. The report was authored by a panel of over 30 distinguished economists and development experts convened by Pope Francis under the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences and Columbia University's Initiative for Policy Dialogue. Well, to get more into this conversation, we're joined by Professor Grieve Chelwa, an Associate Professor of Political Economy and Chair of Social Sciences within the Africa Institute at the Global Studies Universities. Professor Chelwa, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning to you, and I'm glad to be here and hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can. Thank you. Malango Mohlahlana is the Managing Director of Zeni Zeni Sustainable Finance. Malango, good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Before we get into the work that you have been able to do, Prof, alongside the other individuals who are part of this panel, let's perhaps begin by contextualizing the debt problem that the Global South is facing. Often it's seen as, a narrative that is created, and sometimes, falsely so, when countries in the Global South or even on the African continent bemoan the fact that they have to pay much higher interest rates than countries elsewhere in the world. And yet what we now know is that this is not only a perception, it is in fact a reality.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question, and thanks really for giving a platform to discuss this very important report that essentially is a follow-up to the year 2000. I think many of in the audience remember the Jubilee 2000 moment where Pope John Paul II made a clarion call relation of debt in poor countries then, a call acted upon, and very many countries in the world, especially some of the poorest countries in the Global South and even on our own continent, Africa, had the so that was Pope John Paul II 25 years ago. 25 years later, we're back here again, and we are talking about the same issues. So essentially what's really at the core of this is that there's something about the structure of the global economy creates debt crisis in various countries every so often. We had the debt written off 25 years ago, but we're back here again. And our intent in this report is to put forward basically, am I still here?
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry, I thought I'd lost you. So our intention with this report is really to put across recommendations that fix the structural issues in the global economy that perpetually generated crisis in the poorest countries. And your question about risk perception is a correct one. For some reason, the poorest countries in the world are perceived to be much more risky than the richest countries in the world, in spite of our history of very rarely defaulting on debt. Some of the biggest culprits that have defaulted on their debts are rich countries historically. Our countries, the poorest countries, always fight tooth and nail to try to pay back their debts. And yet this perception is not reflected in interest rates. And this then perpetuates the debt crisis. So it's very right. And I'm very sorry if I want to go around about, but I wanted to give some context to how it is we're writing this report today, and also to answer your question about risk perception. You're very right. We struggle tooth and nail to pay our debts. We sacrifice, like you said, we sacrificed expenditure on health, on education to pay our debts, and yet the financial system still sees us, those of us in Africa, as being more risky in spite of a much lower history.
Malango, let me come to you then and give you an opportunity perhaps to also set the context of where countries in the Global South find themselves.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to start by saying that I'm very humbled to be sharing a platform with Professor Chelwa. The commissioners of the Jubilee Report were highly distinguished and actually included my lecturer and supervisor at Warwick University. And maybe to simplify things for the audience and listeners, I think borrowing money is something that we all understand. It's been a feature of human societies for centuries. And that applies to countries as well, which borrow for many different reasons, including to fight wars, to protect their people, but also importantly to build vital infrastructure like hospitals and roads. So it's safe to say that borrowing in and of itself is not bad, even when countries do it. But the challenges when things go wrong, the impacts of that borrowing can be devastating, as we've seen in many countries, particularly as Professor Cho mentioned, in lower income countries in particular. So I think it's very refreshing and not surprising that a religious leader such as the late Pope led this call to address debt of countries because of the significantly negative impacts that debt can have. I would like to focus in particular on some of the issues where debt is the impacts of a country's ability to repay the debt come from outside the country. These are sometimes called externalities in economics. So it's outside your control. And it is one of those big examples is the COVID-19 pandemic. Many African countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, had manageable levels of debt, but because of having to address the COVID pandemic, which is something that was external to many countries, beyond their control, they had to have shift expenditure towards addressing COVID, which then meant having to increase their debt and also making it very difficult for them to repay their debt. So these are some of the really important factors that need to be taken into account. And one of the biggest, and this is a long-term impact that is happening now, but will also continue in the future, is the impact of climate change. And many developing countries, particularly in Africa, are being impacted much more greatly than other countries by climate change. And this plays through in things like floods, natural disasters in particular, but also long drawn out things like debt. Drought. So here in South Africa, for example, the Cape Town drought that happened a couple of years ago was made 3 to 4 times worse because of climate change impacts. And the issue about climate change is that for many countries with high debt levels, low-income countries, they are not the main causes of climate change. And therefore, again, they can't actually address climate change. It's something that richer countries in particular have caused from the so-called global north. And yet the impacts are being felt by the poorer countries. And this feeds then into debt. So, for example, if there's been a flood, a country needs to respond to that. There's often loss of human life, of infrastructure, and so that's a disaster is often declared in the country. And so money then needs to be taken to address that disaster, which, as I said, in many instances, increasingly is being made worse by climate change. And when that happens, then countries are forced often to increase their debt levels, or they then don't have money to be able to allocate to their general requirements like health and education, because they have to repay debt. Yeah. So it's a very complex situation.
In fact, Malango, perhaps I would want to even go as far as saying that the cost of that is multi-pronged, because it's not only in the impact of the changing climate, but of course it also impedes the development of countries, because there are now certain limitations that have been set. Countries have to change the way in which they're doing things. So an easy one to pick would perhaps be energy, and a transition into what is now called as or seen as just energy, and that in and of itself has costs associated with it. Who's going to bear that cost? Because down the line, what is also promised is that if there are no reforms, then there will be fines that countries will have to pay for not taking up some of these reforms that are seen to be more climate friendly. I put that sort of in inverted commas.
Yes, that's a good point. And you referred in particular to energy. So the way that we, and I say we at a global level, I'm speaking about produce energy is one of the main causes of climate change. So from burning fossil fuels, that's coal, oil, and gas. And this is something that many countries rely on. They've been part of our energy mix for a very long time. But as you say, we need to address climate change. We know that we need to significantly reduce emissions. And the most important source of that, as I mentioned, is fossil fuels. So a country, for example, that produces coal, say South Africa, or indeed produces gas and uses that for energy, has to then shift that transition, as you say, away from that. And there's a significant cost involved because you have to implement renewable energy technologies and at the same time wind down your fossil fuel technologies. It's entirely possible, and increasingly renewable energy is actually cheaper often to install new renewable energy than fossil fuels, but there is still a cost involved. And there's also a requirement in terms of changing your skill set within your country. So working at a power plant which uses coal to generate electricity is very different to a power plant that uses, say, solar photovoltaic panels to generate electricity. So there's a huge shift needed in the way the energy sector is set up to be able to address climate change. And again, going back to my comment about who caused climate change, the countries which are causing climate change historically and currently, there's been an agreement at a global level, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. 26 years ago, countries signed onto this agreement, recognizing that climate change exists and must be addressed. And then there's something called the Paris Agreement, which happened in 2015, where countries recognized that money needs to go from the countries that caused climate change to those that didn't, to be able to transition. And without that money and also the technology and capacity that I mentioned, it's almost impossible to do that. So okay. it links to debt, of course, and I think the Jubilee report does talk about this in terms of trying to address climate. It's not on the responsibility of the countries which did not cause climate change to take on more debt to address climate.
Prof. Chelwa, earlier you touched on a need for systemic reform in order to change what has now become somewhat of a vicious cycle that countries affected by this find themselves in. What are some of those reforms, or what should or would some of those reforms entail?
Thanks so much, Madam Cathy, for that question. And I also want to say it's nice to be on this show with Madam Malango, who's made some really incredible contributions here, and I've learned a great deal from them. So I think she did talk about this idea of externalities or external factors. When we look at the history of debt crisis in poor countries, what we tend to find is that the predominant cause of this crisis are factors that are external to these countries. There is usually a temptation, and I think at the beginning of this program you talked about dangerous narratives. There's a temptation to see this crisis as internally generated. It is something about the country of Zambia or South Africa or Ethiopia or Ghana or Sri Lanka that they are doing that is causing the crisis. But when we've looked at the evidence extensively over long periods of time, we find that the predominant causes are external. Structural factors are operating at a global level. So, for example, one clear-cut example is, as it is now, Cathy, we do not have a global system or a global structure or a global mechanism to resolve debt crisis very quickly. We have, for example, within countries, bankruptcy laws. When a company goes into debt trouble, the company can declare bankruptcy, and then at least things can be wound down in a very systematic way, protecting the workers, protecting the creditors, and protecting other larger stakeholders. But as it regards countries, we don't have such a process. So often when a country like Zambia gets into a debt crisis, what ensues is chaos. There's chaos, there's uncertainty, it can take years, and in this period when it's taking years to resolve the crisis, the poor are suffering, issues of climate change are neglected, issues of gender are neglected, issues of development are neglected. So one of the things that we're trying to propose in this particular report is to put into place a multilateral, predictable, systematic, very clear process by which debt crisis can be resolved in a predictable way, in a very quick way that protects the most vulnerable, right? And ordinarily, this should be done by, for example, the international financial institutions like the IMF. But the IMF hasn't been doing this job pretty well. In fact, this may not be the position of my other co-commissioners, but is a position that I hold pretty strongly, is that in many cases, the IMF actually makes things worse, right? So we really need to reform how we think about bankruptcy at the level of countries. We also need to think about
Sorry for coming in there. I'm going to pause you there, ask you to hold that thought while we take the latest news headlines. We'll continue with this conversation on the other side of the headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. On the news headlines, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, says global war creates significant hardships. Lamola addressed the third G20 Sherpas meeting underway in the Sun City Resort in Northwest. 3 members of a Northern Cape school governing body remain behind bars after they were arrested for allegedly stealing over R500,000 from AB Kuluane Primary School in Kuruman. And the world's largest medical charity, the Wellcome Trust, is to fund controversial research enabling scientists to build human DNA from scratch. A full update follows at the top of the hour.
The citizens and the believers are in a high-level clash of emotions. Drama meets tension. The fight for 3 points is real. This is the PSL Promotional Playoffs. Catch the thrilling encounter between Cape Town City and Castrick Stars this Monday, 30 June at 2:30 p.m. Streaming live on SABC Plus and SABC2. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Nelson Mandela once said, "There can be no greater gift than that of giving one's time and energy to helping others without expecting anything in return."
What's your Mandela Day game plan this year? Why not lace up those sneakers and hit the ground running at our annual Mandela Day Walk and Run on July 19th at the DP World Wanderers Stadium, Ilovo. You can walk 5Ks, run 10 and 21Ks, and still have enough energy to have fun. It's a whirlwind of fun and laughter, all for a fantastic cause. Every cent goes to support the excellent work of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Enter on mandeladay.com or register for the virtual race on fundnation.org/Nelson Mandela. See you there.
The National Pulse, weekdays 3 to 6 p.m.
What about the many high-profile DA leaders that are not part of your party any longer? I'm looking at Musi Maimani, Pumzile van Dam, Lindiwe Mazibuko, Makashule Ghana, Herman Bashaba. For whatever reason, could be many of what we spoke about above before, but they're gone. What does that say about the DA's ability to hold on to these leaders that may well be the type of leaders that you would need to be able to govern the country?
Far more black leaders have come to our party and grown up through the party than have ever left our party. So you're not mentioning Sali Malaxi, you're not mentioning Salim Simanga, you're not mentioning Sibiru Wahube, you're not mentioning any of those, because nobody knows the name of any black leader in the DA because they're considered to be sellout by the media and they only become famous when they leave the DA.
Alan Ziller, chairperson of the DA's Federal Council.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM. The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point. We're looking at the findings of the Jubilee report, a report really that offers a blueprint for tackling the debt and development crisis and how to fix then, the cycle of debt that many countries in the global south find themselves trapped in. Professor Grieve Chelwa is an associate professor of political economy and chair of social sciences within the Africa Institute at the Global Studies University, and is one of the commissioners of this report. Malango Mohoho is the managing director of Zeni Zeni Sustainable Finance. So, Prof, you were talking about the mechanisms that multilateral institutions need to have when it comes to helping countries in resolving their finances in the same way that those sort of facilities exist for individuals should they find themselves bankrupt.
Yes, that's true. And basically, yes. So this a multilateral system that allows very quick resolution of debt crisis at the global level does not exist as it is now. What we have are patchwork solutions, experimental solutions, which actually make the situation much, much, much worse instead of improving it. So we're proposing that we have some type of multilateral predictable system that resolves this crisis timelessly. But the point that Ms. Malango made at the beginning is an important one for the audience to keep in mind, that debt in and of itself is not bad. Precisely just as it is, debt can be used for at individual level. You want to buy a house. Often when you're trying to buy a house, you're quite younger, you're just starting out in life, but as you go through your life, your incomes will rise, and much later you may be able to afford a house, but you won't be able to afford it now. What you do is you take out a mortgage, right? And then you buy your house, and then as you go along in your life, as you make investments in your own productivity, then you pay it off. Similarly for countries, especially poor countries are in a desperate need to develop. They need to build roads, hospitals, universities, power stations, do clean, just transitions. All these things require huge amounts of capital. And right now, this global system does not provide poor countries with this capital in adequate amounts. So often what happens is that many of these poor countries resort to taking out very expensive loans, just like it happens at a local level. When poor people, low-income people cannot get access to credit, what happens? They go to the local Shylock, who gives them a loan at a very exorbitant interest rates, and then this traps them in perpetual debt. So what we're also proposing in this report is we have to be able to make sure that our multilateral development banks, or we establish new types of development banks that can provide adequate credit to poor countries at reasonable interest rates over long time spans, so that they can engage in this business of development, so that further down the line they are not as dependent on debt as they ought to be. So essentially these are the kinds of reforms that we're trying to propose, Cathy, and there are many others in the report. But the important point to take away from this is that our reforms mostly focus on the external environment, because in our estimation, in our analysis, it is the external environment that impinges upon poor countries and therefore creates this crisis. There's very little, even if today we eliminated corruption from Zambia, right, a country that I know better, which I am from, it is very likely, even if we reduce corruption to a bare minimum, Zambia will still be in a debt crisis in 25 years' time if we don't resolve these external global factors in the ways that I've just articulated here. And I'm very happy later on to go into even much more specific details. But that is the main message of the report. As I've written it, as I've read it, is that it is the external environment. And the global north, as Ms. Malango said it earlier, the global north has a moral responsibility to fix the external environment because of history. Right, in terms of climate change, they've been the ones that have historically increased emissions. Just in terms of colonialism, neocolonialism, racism, sexism, anti-black racism, and those kinds of things. So there's a moral responsibility on the global north to fix the external environment, and this is the big thrust of our report.
On the question of the moral imperative that countries in the West would particularly have, do you get a sense that this is the view necessarily that these countries hold? Because yes, here and there, you'll find some countries that acknowledge that the reason why the world we're living in is as unequal as it is because of imperialism, is because of colonialism, etc. But they don't often agree on what then should be done today to remedy some of those ills of the past and to bring everybody perhaps towards a more towards a more just starting point than where we find ourselves in today, or to equal that playing field a bit more, Prof?
Yeah, that's an important question. I mean, there's a lot of resistance in the global north. Some of the resistance is just that, some people in the global north just tend to be bigots. Some of the resistance is just that because making that recognition or making that acknowledgement has cost implications on them. But this is why it's very important. I think Ms. Malango made the point earlier. It's very important who has convened this report, this commission. This commission has been convened by a moral, theological, religious authority. It was convened by the late Pope Francis. So it's very important that the report comes from there in essentially making, if, we have a moral responsibility, whether you like it or not, to right the historical wrongs. And those wrongs are not just stuck in history. They keep on reverberating even today. The crises that are being faced by the most vulnerable people in the world, in the global south, in Africa, are precisely because of history. Right, so you have a moral responsibility. You may not accept it, but you've got to accept it. And I think, is it Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the famous quote about the arc of justice is long, or the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice, or something like that. I may be paraphrasing it. The point is, with these kinds of interventions, I think we will win. Do these kinds of interventions in the way that we've made this, written this report, the place that the report is coming from. I hope our friends in the global north get to, the politicians in the global north get to accept these kinds of arguments, and then they get to work with us in writing, in reordering and reorienting our global economy to favor the most vulnerable, to favor climate justice, and so on and so forth. So and this is what has happened in history. Certainly, at some points in time, people will make the argument that it is impossible. It was impossible that colonialism, at least formal colonialism, would end, but it did end because folks made the moral argument. People were saying in the U.S. South, it was impossible that Jim Crow and racism in the South will end, but people made the moral argument. Our forefathers and mothers made the moral arguments, and that system at least has ended. It was the same for apartheid in South Africa. People made the argument apartheid would never end, former apartheid would never end, but folks made the moral argument, and apartheid ended. So it is important to make these kinds of arguments, even in the face of resistance.
Okay.
And if you read our report, it's very clear on making the argument that the only reason why the poor parts of the world are peopled by black and brown people is because of racism. That's the only reason why. It's because of external factors. We've got to fix this.
Okay. Malango, I'm also thinking about the fact that, yes, it's great that work like this exists and that more is continuously being done, right, to build a case for why these kind of initiatives are important. But if we're being honest here, it's not that some of the countries involved don't know about the need for these reforms. It's that, there's just not enough political will to drive it in that direction. So then how do we ensure that work of this kind doesn't simply get lost as being another report, as being another recommendation that a body will sit and acknowledge the existence of, and yes, we'll look into it, and yeah, we'll see how we can implement it. And, 10 years down the line, there's a new team of commissioners with even more dire findings, and yet no different outcomes.
You make an important point, and I think it speaks to human nature. That there are crises and we might respond to a crisis, but then another one comes up and our focus goes in another direction. But I do think that given the people involved in publishing the report who have significant influence and continued advocacy and on platforms such as SAFM will keep this in people's minds. And I do think ultimately it's up to the individual government. So as much as there's been a focus on the report on what needs to be done at a global level, I think there's a lot that can be done and should be done actually within all countries, but particularly low income and heavily indebted countries. So, for example, accountability to citizens, I think, is really important. Why they're taking on that debt, and communicating how that will benefit the country in taking on that debt. So to be held accountable for that, and the professor mentioned the corruption, which is sometimes seen as one of the causes, but as he points out, it's often not. But the a lot of countries also do not have the capacity and the public expenditure and financial accountability frameworks to be able to effectively understand when they're taking on debt and how they're using the debt and the overall implications of that in their economies. And so countries need to be able to boost that capacity to be able to do it. So, for example, I was listening to a podcast about an investor, a private investor in sovereign debt. And he gave an example of going to a country, it happened to be in Africa, but it could be in another country, and speaking to the Treasury or Ministry of Finance to get some statistics, and was asking for some basic statistics, and they couldn't provide them. And so what then happens in terms of the perceptions of that country's risk? There's maybe a bit of a gap in understanding without those statistics. And what happens in financial markets, and this is not personal to Africa or low-income countries, is when there's some uncertainty, that translates to, okay, there's higher risk, which then translates to higher pricing. So I think there's a lot, if countries work to improve the information that is shared with potential creditors or existing creditors, I think that will go a long way. And as I said, definitely involving their citizens and continually pushing in the multilateral fora that I mentioned in this report, creating new ones as well to be able to address it. And just to finish as well on this point is that the nature of debt, particularly in many African countries, is changing. We're increasingly borrowing from the private sector, which brings a whole different set of dynamics. When you're engaging with countries on a sovereign level, I think the moral argument and as the professor mentioned, the histories of colonialism, externalities, etc., can be made.
Okay.
But I would argue in the private sector, it's very difficult because they're coming from a different perspective. They're investing to make a return. The moral suasion argument doesn't work, as we've seen in the past. I think that's the big challenge. And I'm not entirely sure that we have the answers to that.
Right.
And just to finally say is that think about who those investors are. If it is a pensioner, for example, their big pension fund is investing money, and a country happens to get into debt distress and they have an investment there, how do you address that? So I don't have answers to that right now, but I think it's important to recognize the changing dynamics of the sovereign debt landscape as well.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and your contributions to this conversation. Malango Mohoho is Managing Director, Zeni Zeni Sustainable Finance, and Professor Grieve Chelwa, an Associate Professor of Political Economy and the Chair of Social Sciences at the Africa Institute of Global Studies University. That's where we end off the show on The Talking Point today. Up next is the book reading.
SFM's award-winning drama department presents another episode of the book, A Testament of Hope, the autobiography of Dr. Sam Motswenyane. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised.
I was highly impressed with the speech R.V. Selope Thema delivered at the conference of the MRA held in Johannesburg. He said, "In the past, black people tried to stop the white people from entering our country. King Shaka had actually stationed his best army of brave men at a place on the Natal coastline called Kangela, which the Europeans called Kongela. During Shaka's time," Mr. Thema said, "it was already predicted and known that some foreign invaders with flowing hair would emerge from beneath the waves and make an attempt at conquering the country. Shaka's army at Kangela was therefore instructed every day to pierce the surging waves in an effort to prohibit and stave off the invaders from entering the country. Unfortunately, Shaka was not successful in his efforts to prevent the white people from encroaching into and settling in our country. In Shaka's time, we tried to stop them from entering the country from the sea. But today we have to watch them also from the sky above. We must therefore today accept the reality that the old slogan, Africa for the Africans, can no longer serve an appropriate vision for the future. We must now all seek and strive to build a new vision of an Africa for all, an Africa that transcends our present narrow ethnic and racial differences. Selope Thema was an eminent South African who did not have very high academic qualifications, but he was a brilliant speaker and a former editor of the Bantu World, a precursor to the Sowetan of today. He was such a brilliant man that many people thought of him as a great academic. He came from the Mamabulu area in the Limpopo province, where he rose from very humble beginnings. Although he was a founding member of the African National Congress, he was essentially a nationalist at heart and veered away from the ANC when the Communist Party formed a closer relationship with the organization. He then formed what was called the African Nationalist Bloc of the ANC. The township called KwaThema in Springs is actually named after him, and I'm happy that he is being remembered in this country because in his lifetime, R.V. Selope Thema made an outstanding contribution to changing the situation in our country. Whatever opinions or ideas one may have had about the MRA, it did undoubtedly provide a platform for dialogue and in this way made a positive contribution towards softening the ground for the changes that were later implemented to reduce racial tensions and bring about peace and stability in South Africa. Since childhood, I've been very closely attached to the Methodist Church, and I learned early on in my life to love the church. As a young boy, I used to carry my father's hymnals and Bible as I regularly accompanied him to church. At home, my father brought the family together at prayer time in the evenings and on every Sunday evening without fail. My religious upbringing in a family of devoted Christians as well as my training as a social worker have exercised quite a considerable influence on my behavior, my way of life, and my broad interaction with other people. When I grew up and became a full member of the Methodist Church in Alexander Township, I also played an active role in the training of the youth in our church through my involvement in Sunday school work. I have always loved listening to good sermons by eminent preachers. I remember during my school days at the Jan Hofmeyer School of Social Work how I used to frequent the Central Methodist Church, then located at the corner of Grace and Pritchard Streets. I would go there to listen to those powerful and soul-stirring sermons of the famous Methodist preacher, the late Reverend J.B. Webb. Each time after I had seen him and listened to him preach, I would feel inwardly satisfied to have been spiritually nourished and uplifted. The only dissonance I experienced in visiting the Central Methodist Church was that black people were not allowed to sit side by side with the white Christians to worship God. Each time that I visited the church during the early 1950s, the steward, Dr. T.D. Hall, whom I had met through my soil conservation activities in ANSCA, would courteously lead me away from the main entrance of the church hall and usher me to the gallery, where I sat alone looking at the white congregation and the preacher below. But because of my passionate desire